Hello, welcome to another Purple Insider Extra. Matthew Coller along with Sam Ekstrom here from Purple Insider as we continue our series looking at the mysteries of what happened to some players that either did not work out or did not get opportunities for the 2021 Vikings. And we continue with Wyatt Davis, the Vikings' third-round draft pick. And Sam, I'll admit to you this, on draft night, I gave the pick an A+. The assumption on draft night was that the Vikings had finally picked their big, beefy guard who could pass block, who could step right in and transform this offensive line along with Christian Darrisaw. Well, Darrisaw worked out when he was healthy, but Wyatt Davis saw 0 snaps this season. So I ask you, what happened to this guy?
Well, the Vikings' blind spot at interior offensive line continues, right? This is a trend. This is not an anomaly. It didn't work with Drew Samia. Their move on Oli Udoh was foolhardy. Dakota Dozier didn't work out when they tried to make him a starter. And we can think of countless other guards they've drafted over the years that fell flat. And I think they believe that, hey, we're going to go third round here. We're not trying a day 3 flyer. This guy is going to be foolproof. They liked his size. They liked his resume at Ohio State. And the only thing we really heard about Davis was he was overweight. They didn't give him even second team reps in training camp. And it was at the point where, they're elevating Oli Udoh, who moved from tackle, who had never played guard. That's where they were at. And then Dakota Dozier, who was like fresh out of the hospital, was getting activated before Wyatt Davis for games. Just a curious season all around. And again, this is where you kind of have to question the coaching staff, but also trust them because they're usually right about these guys. You pointed this out in the past. Typically, guys that don't play for the Vikings, they might move on somewhere else, and they're not very good there either. So sometimes the transition's hard for offensive linemen to the NFL. That makes sense. But it also doesn't bode well for Davis's future either, unless he can take a massive step. It's unclear if his conditioning was the sole reason why he wasn't good, or if there was something more, if it was his ability to grasp the scheme or his pass blocking. I don't know if we know too many details because there was just so little evidence to even ask the coaching staff about that. We didn't get a lot of answers on it, but his lack of exposure in this offense certainly is alarming.
And when I remember distinctly asking, I think it was Clint Kubiak, like, what is happening with Wyatt Davis? And his answer was, well, developing is the word that I would use, which is sort of I don't really want to talk about the problems that we're having and why we don't want to start him. But it is concerning when you're talking about putting in Blake Brandel at a point where there was a player injured. I think it was Oli Udoh, and Blake Brandel had to come in for a few plays in one of the games that Wyatt Davis was active. And then in many of the games, he's just not active at all. And we had the comment from Mike Zimmer about the type of shape that he was in. And I think that is something to take seriously because it's not like you can work yourself into shape throughout a season. You have practices, you have game planning, you have meetings all day. Usually training camp is the time where you get into that game shape. But for the NFL now, it's a 365 day a year. I mean, most NFL players are taking a couple of weeks off and then getting right back into it. And they're setting themselves up to be in game shape by the time for week 1. So if you're behind, it's not like you could really just make up that time while everybody else in the NFL has been working as hard as they have. But there's also an element of it. And I think that it's fair to wonder about Mike Zimmer and rookies anyway, and about this team's ability to figure out who can play at guard. And even just their ability to evaluate offensive linemen. I'm watching the playoffs and Tom Compton is playing right tackle and playing well and getting praise from the broadcast. Like, wait a minute, what's happening here? So it's not that Drew Samia went somewhere else and became the next Will Shields or anything, but there is a part of me that leaves the door open for, were you too harsh on Wyatt Davis to not even have him active or even consider him at the end of the year when you're out of the playoff race to be active, to get a start, to get some opportunity?
Yeah. I mean, if you think about historically, this coaching staff, when they deal with rookie offensive linemen, they're usually too slow to promote them. They were too slow with Brian O'Neill, seemingly too slow with Christian Darrisaw, especially with the way Rashad Hill was playing. They were really slow with Ezra Cleveland. They were a couple games slow, I think, with Pat Elflein. I think I'm correct on that. Maybe not. He might have played right away.
I think he played right away.
He played right away. Okay. So there are examples where they played right away, but in recent years, they've been a little slow and hesitant to promote these guys. And I think the fact that we didn't see Davis at all, and this is again in week 18, what are you doing? You don't need to win. You'd rather get a sample size of see what some of these guys can do, and they don't play Wyatt Davis. That's disappointing. And I know Mike Zimmer was pretty, strongly against that. He didn't like that philosophy, but organizationally, it gives the Vikings left to work with this coming year. Now, let's be real about something too. This offense could change. This blocking scheme could change. And I think that a new coaching staff could come in with fresh eyes and kind of have a new outlook on it. And that might give Davis new energy and like new motivation if he's not being judged so harshly by Zimmer and company. We don't know if Rauscher will be the offensive line coach. So this might be a second lease on life for Davis. We'll see if he can take advantage of it.
And the Vikings had flipped what they wanted from their guards in terms of scheme-wise, but then also didn't change their scheme. So they were talking about, well, we want more pass blocking, bigger, beefier guards. And then they say, well, this guy can't do the thing that we need him to do in the zone blocking. Well, those don't really match up, but it has become par for the course with the interior offensive line as the previous regime chased its tail. Maybe that will be different, but when a new GM comes in, they're going to have to look at this position as wide open and not, hey, here's the 3rd round pick who could be your long-term guard. It's more of maybe he will, but it becomes a long shot when the guy can't get on the field at any point in the first year. I don't think that there were red flags during the draft process though, Sam. I mean, the fact that the rest of the league didn't see him as a 1st round prospect does not throw you off because they don't really draft guards or centers super high that often, even when they're decent to good prospects. They usually only do it when it's Quentin Nelson or somebody who could truly be great. So I don't think there was anything we could look at in the draft process and say, other than maybe there was an injury mixed in there that might have gotten him behind in his progress. But I don't think there was anything to look at and say, oh yeah, well, this guy, you should have seen it coming.
Yeah, I mean, if the conditioning thing is sort of the cause behind this, I mean, that would speak more to work ethic, which is a little more personality driven, and that's probably tough to get a read on from the game tape. But everything was pretty polished. I mean, Ohio State's got a good track record. I'm sure they had recommendations galore. They talked to people, and we know the Vikings do their research on these things, so they felt like it was all squared away. This didn't seem like a risky pick. And I was with you. I thought this was maybe a plug and play and someone who might have even been more likely than Darisaw to have a successful rookie year. Didn't pan out that way. And now I'd say that his whole tenure in Minnesota is in question if he can't get it together in year 2.
If there's one lesson to be learned, it's probably that if you draft to fill a spot and you don't do anything else in free agency like they didn't, that's when you end up having to panic right before training camp and move Oli Udoh to guard, which I think was just very unfair to Oli Udoh, who could be their next swing tackle. So we'll continue our series looking at what happened to that guy, some of the mysteries of players who either didn't work out or did not get an opportunity to play in 2021. Make sure you listen to, by the way, our daily podcast, Purple Insider, wherever you get your podcasts, and read our written work at purpleinsider.substack.com. We'll catch you next time.